Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming to you guys my throwback review for the pilot of the TV series White Collar. Alright, so this is a review series I started a few months back on the channel, and I was hoping to do once a week or once every couple weeks do a new review for a kind of throwback pilot episode. Unfortunately, that didn't work out with the timing of things, but hopefully now we'll get into some more of them here. Again, I don't want to make any promises, but hopefully around that kind of schedule. We'll have 2 out for sure the next couple weeks here with White Collar, and then I'll be doing Justified. I think that one actually might be before this one. The way the scheduling goes with the new Justified miniseries coming out. I'm really excited for that, and of course I'll talk more about that in that other one. So yeah, really excited to be kind of back for this series. So this one I'll be taking a look at the pilot of White Collar, and in these kind of as part of the series, but in each review I'll be taking a look at these pilot episodes of shows that have completely finished airing and ideally have been kind of off the air for at least 2 years. That's kind of the main kind of parameters I would be going off of here. Something like maybe like Better Call Saul might be an exception, right? Because that was in the last year or so that ended off. But mostly I want to take a look at more of some older shows. Ones that I haven't seen, for a while. That's the case with White Collar, and ones that I, of course, have seen as well. We'll throw a few in there, like Better Call Saul, which, of course, I've seen somewhat recently, right? So, anyways, love to hear your guys' thoughts on White Collar. Obviously, this pilot episode, but just the show in general, if you have seen it. What did you think of the show? I know it's been, like I said, off the air for quite a few years now. I mean, quite a few years. I think it was like 2015 when the show ended, I want to say. Around there, 2016 maybe, 2014, so somewhere in those times, in those years. So it's been a while, and it is one of my favorite shows of all time. I'll say that right here. I really love the show, watching it. So yeah, love to take a look at this pilot. And like I said, it has probably been, I mean, at least, I want to say 5 years, maybe 4 years at least that I've seen this pilot episode. So watching this episode was really like kind of watching it for the first time again. I do remember some things, right? But yeah, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. And if you enjoy this review and kind of this series and the idea in general, please do a like and consider subscribing to the channel as well. We'd really appreciate that. So anyways, we'll start off here with just some of the basics, and then I'll get into my criteria, which will be the just the kind of 4 things: is the introduction of the characters, introduction of the world or atmosphere, so kind of world building, the hook or the twist. That's a big thing with these pilot episodes, so I think that's interesting to take a look at. And then the originality and uniqueness. Does it stand out kind of within the genre that it's playing in? And so we'll take a look at all of those, and then I'll end off with a rating. So, like I said, let's start off with some of the basics here. So for the directing and writing, kind of who's behind this pilot episode. So, of course, the series was created by Jeff Easton, and of course he writes this pilot episode, and he was along for the show, I believe, through the whole run. I don't think he was as involved in the couple last seasons, right? Season 5, maybe 6 in there. But the first few seasons, he did write quite a few episodes in. And so, or maybe he did just take a step back, although he was still very involved. I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that he wrote some, fewer episodes in the later seasons, but certainly was very involved with this first season. So he wrote the pilot episode, and it is directed by Bronwyn Hughes, and she's directed episodes for Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, a lot of shows, a lot of shows out there, and I believe it was like season 1 of Breaking Bad that she did an episode for. So that's really cool. To know that she was kind of associated with Breaking Bad in its early days, and so she came along to direct this pilot. And I believe that she also then directs many more episodes in White Collar as well, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, pretty cool to see her kind of come along for the pilot and then and kind of continue with the show. So, in terms of the cast for this one, of course, we have Matt Bomer, Tim DeKay, Willie Garson, which it's little kind of bittersweet seeing him here. Really great to see him, but unfortunately he did pass away. It's almost, I think it has been now 2 years since, which is crazy in 2021, but so really great to see him here, but it's sad that he has passed. Marsha Thomason and Tiffany Thiessen, who I think was going into the show probably the biggest name actually in this cast. She was on the 90210 and a couple of the a couple other shows like that, some really popular ones that I'm not familiar with, of course. Saved by the Bell, that's something like that. Something like that. I think she was in that, but yeah, so I'm sure a lot of other people knew her very well at the time. So yeah, those are the cast members. Of course, as the show goes on, we get a lot more. Alexandra Daddario, I wouldn't really say she's like in this episode. She has a couple scenes and there's a picture of her, but she does definitely get a bigger role as the rest of the season and then season 2 plays out. So definitely some higher, or more well-known cast members come along. But for the pilot episode, that's pretty much it. Okay, so the premise of the show then, or of this pilot episode where we start, is basically we have Neil Caffrey kind of on one side, who is a criminal, but a kind of a white-collar criminal, right? Kind of an art forger, a thief, kind of just this genius kind of mastermind, who is also kind of a smartass, right? Likes to stay ahead of the cops and all this kind of stuff and get away with things. But he's a little kind of narcissistic too, right? Because he always wants to have his name on things, and all that kind of thing. So he's on one side of it. He escapes from prison here at the beginning of the episode. And then the other hand, we have Peter Burke, who's this, I believe he's like the head of his department in white-collar crimes. With the FBI, I believe, right? And so he's the one who put Neil in jail, right? And so he's then called to help track Neil down and catch him and put him back in jail. And then, of course, Neil, being Neil, figures out this kind of loophole to try to get out of jail, and that is to become Peter's informant and actually help him with other white-collar criminals that are like him. And so then they kind of, start to form this partnership, and that's kind of, where the show goes from there in terms of this kind of, you could call it, I guess, this kind of buddy cop drama that continues then throughout the run. So that's just a very basic premise, and like I said, just kind of the pilot episode. Of course, lots of things happen throughout the show, but that's kind of what we're dealing with here. So anyways, with all that being said, then let's get into a bit more of analysis for the episode. So let's start off with the introduction of the characters then. And in this one, I would say it's characters plural, right? Some of these shows, like Breaking Bad, to me is the biggest example, right? Where it's pretty much just that kind of main character that we're focusing on with Walter White. But in this show, it is kind of this ensemble cast, right? But I guess you could probably say the duo at the center, right? With Neil Caffrey and Peter Burke. So in terms of the characters, let's start off then with Neil Caffrey, probably the most interesting character, right, that's in this one. And I think it's really great. Obviously, just like physically the way they introduce him, with him escaping from prison. And I'll talk more about that when I talk about the hook of the episode for sure. But just the way that they introduce him like that is so good. I mean, there is no really dialogue until a little bit, a few minutes later in the episode. But at that point, there's no dialogue, no exposition, telling us who Neil Caffrey is and, all this stuff. We're just witnessing this guy walk out of a prison out the front door in a guard's costume, right? In a staff costume. And get out of jail, and the way he's able to kind of track things down. He goes and gets the coat that is then worn by the people who, hail the cars and the valet parking people, right? So that he ends up stealing this car and gets money from the guy. So it's just brilliant, right? And so we know right away exactly who that character of Neil Caffrey is without even a word being spoken about him. And it's just such a great sequence. Again, I'll talk more about that with the hook, but such a great sequence to start off the episode and to introduce that character. And then you want to talk about the character of Neil Caffrey. I think he's really kind of this charmer, right? This genius, right? Kind of like I said, mastermind. Kind of character, and obviously this criminal as well. He's a white collar criminal, gets away with these, like I said, kind of art theft, these kinds of crimes, right? And we don't get the full details of what he has done, I don't think, in this pilot episode, but as the series goes on, I remember, obviously we kind of hear more about that. So he is all these things, but he is a little vulnerable. He does have that vulnerability, and that is his girlfriend, Kate, right? Played by Alexandra Dario, which, like I said, I think she's like in one little quick scene, and then her photo is a big part of the episode, but she's not really in it. But anyways, that is his one vulnerability, and we see that kind of throughout this pilot episode, that he is, really smart, and he's able to kind of see ahead of things and get himself out of situations that might be dangerous and all this kind of stuff. But it's that one thing that's holding him back, and it's this girl. It's Kate, right, for him. And that really does continue. Again, I don't want to spoil anything too much for the rest of the show, but for those who have seen it, of course, it doesn't continue, the whole show long, but that is a big theme in these first few seasons, I would say, for Neil. And I think that's cool. I mean, he's not just a perfect genius mastermind who has no flaws. It's just that's not as, great of a character to watch. It is really cool that he has this kind of vulnerability about him, and they make that really known in this episode. So, and even the very ending of the episode too, with him looking at the photograph of her, and we know, that's going to be a lingering thing that's going to continue on going forward with Neil, right? This is not just something that he's going to forget, and that he's not, going to pursue, right? This is something that might get him into some trouble, right? So that's exactly kind of that angle. And then you want to talk about Peter Burke, a really great introduction for him as well. Obviously, the two kind of parallel, right? So we get Neil escaping from prison, and then we see the scene with Peter, kind of one right after the other. And the scene with Peter, not as good, obviously, but it's pretty great too, where they're trying to crack this safe, and he noticed at the last minute, right, that the guy spelt the words FBI with the code. And that it was a trap, and of course it just blows up. And just the way he talks to everybody, and, it basically just shows that he's, kind of outsmarts them a little bit, kind of talks down to them. So he does have a bit of that ego to him, I would say you could see in that scene. But he is kind of, again, there's a little bit more of a vulnerability to him as well. He's not just this, cool, collected, kind of stereotypical, kind of detective character that's the head of this department at the FBI, right? He does have a bit of vulnerability, and again, it has to do with kind of the woman in his life, his wife, right, played by Tiffany Thiessen, and her being kind of his little weak spot, right? That he, and in this episode, they kind of play on the fact that he doesn't know enough about her to plan this vacation or for their anniversary, what to get her and all that stuff. And so there is a bit of that to him as well. We see kind of a softer side of him, and it's not just this, like we see in the first scene, this kind of composed, a little bit egotistical, right? FBI agent who's just, kind of out there on the straight and narrow, trying to get these criminals, right? We do get a bit of a weaker side, or not a weaker side of him, but a little softer side of him there. So, I think, again, a pretty good character. Not as good as Neil, though, right? Not as good as Neil. He's kind of the main focal point. But for being this kind of duo, I guess, I think it's a really good match, obviously, right? Because, again, you could even say Peter does have kind of the stick up his ass, right? He's that kind of a character, that kind of a guy. And like I said, without that soft side, he'd be pretty stereotypical, right? But he's kind of that stick up his ass kind of guy, and Neil is the complete opposite, this really smart ass kind of guy. And so, of course, that duo was set up really well there. So, and then in terms of, you want to talk about I talk about Mozzie, right, played by Willie Garson. Like I said, kind of bittersweet to see him in the show here. And he is just so great throughout the entire run of the show. He's just amazing, right? And I think he was in Sex and the City as well, played a smaller character there. So, I haven't watched that show, but I'm sure it'd be great there too. But yeah, so you want to talk about Mozzie too. Again, kind of a stereotypical character, not much to him here in this episode. But just, a really kind of cool side character, being this kind of mysterious, kind of sneaky guy, that's Neil's friend. He's able to get information for him, be this kind of sidekick, if you will. And I think Willie Garson just brings such a kind of character, I guess, to the character, right? He brings a little bit of a kind of extra flair to that character, which I think makes it even more interesting for sure. And then you want to talk, go down the line a little bit more. Tiffany Thiessen, Peter's wife, she is a pretty stereotypical, I would say, in this episode. Again, as the show goes on, we see a little bit more with that dynamic and that relationship there. But yeah, in terms of this episode, I would say, relatively, stereotypical as Peter's wife there. But anyways, I think that's about it in terms of the characters. Of course, the main conversation is all about that duo, and I think it's just such a great duo that they set up, and both great characters in this pilot episode. So yeah, great stuff there. Though of course, there are still some stereotypes, but like I said, I think they kind of add a little bit more to both of those characters there with Neil and Peter. So then we want to talk about the introduction of the world or atmosphere. It's kind of the world building side of things. And this one doesn't apply as much to this show, I would say, or to this pilot. I guess you could say the introduction of kind of the white-collar crimes, right? White-collar criminals. We get a lot of kind of the art forgery in this episode in the pilot, where we get information about that, how people, photocopy, or not photocopy, but forge these bonds, right? How they're able to do that. Carl Hagen, who's the criminal in this episode, kind of the villain of the week or the criminal of the week, right? And he ends up signing the bonds and all that stuff. And that is kind of a reoccurring thing. We get a lot of that with kind of the ego of these white-collar criminals as the show goes on. And obviously Neil, is also one of those people that fits that description. So we get a little bit of that in this pilot episode. It's kind of like a brief introduction to kind of the kinds of crimes that we'll be dealing with as the show goes on. And in terms of, the FBI stuff's pretty, it's pretty standard, right? They just are in a glass office, and that's kind of what it is. So in terms of the world, I would say just kind of a basic, atmosphere of FBI, this cop drama kind of thing. And then a little bit of that kind of world of the white-collar criminal, which we get. So yeah, pretty good, but again, just doesn't really apply as much to this pilot episode. Something like a Game of Thrones would be a great one for that, right? Because that's so much world building and so much going on. But for this one, not as much, right? Okay, so next we have the hook or the twist, and this can either be in the cold open or the ending of the episode. Some pilots, I think, do both. And this one I actually would say it's both. Right? If we want to just, kind of jump ahead, we'll talk about the ending first, because I think the cold open is obviously kind of the bigger hook and that kind of thing. But the ending also has kind of a hook, if you want to say, or a cliffhanger, right? And especially for a show like this that's mainly a procedural, right? Of course, there are kind of plot lines that run through, of course, but it is at basics here, a procedural show. And so for a pilot episode like this, something like Suits that I took a look at a few months ago on the channel, kind of the last review in this series, if you will, that one didn't really have anything at the ending, right? Because it was the kind of this procedural thing. There wasn't really much of a mystery, right? The crime of the week or the case of the week was solved, and that's kind of the way it ended, right? It was more of just kind of the feeling of Suits that wanted to, that kind of brought you back, right? That you wanted to tune into the next episode. But this one, there actually is a bit of a mystery. It is Kate, right? It's Neil having that picture of Kate with the man on her shoulder, and it's kind of this mystery of, oh, was she actually taken? Like, is Neil going to be able to track this guy down, whoever he is, that has her? And what's the story behind this? So it does leave you with a little bit of a question mark, a little bit of a mystery there at the end. And he kind of just looks at the picture and then kind of looks into the distance, right? He's got kind of this ominous thing, right? And like I said earlier, that is going to be a sticking point for Neil. He's not going to be able to just let her go and forget about it, especially after getting that picture, right? He's going to try to track her down and figure out what has happened, right? He's going to dedicate a lot of time to doing that, and of course we see that play out. But right in the ending, that's kind of where we're left. So in that way, for a procedural show, I think it's great. I think that's a great ending. Just kind of leaves that mystery and leaves you with that kind of, after a week, right? You think about it, you're like, oh, I kind of want to see what that mystery is. I want to see where that plays out, right? And you tune into the next episode. So something like a Lost, right, comes to mind. Of course, those kind of shows have cliffhangers and want you, to keep coming back for that mystery. But for a show like this that doesn't even necessarily need to have that as a procedural, I think it's really impressive that they kind of have that in there. So kudos to them on that one. Okay, so even more good stuff to talk about is the cold open, the kind of actual hook of the episode, which is fantastic. It is a prison escape, and it's just such a great sequence, like I talked about, just to introduce Neil. Without any dialogue, without any exposition, we know who this character is. I mean, literally, he walks out of like I said, the front door of the prison in a guard's uniform, and then does all this kind of stuff afterwards in that whole sequence. And they have that song, I'm coming, right? I think that's what it's called, right? I'm coming. Those kind of the main lyrics, and that is just such a great way to start off this pilot episode, and it gets you hooked. It's like, I'm watching this guy escape prison, walk through the front door in a guard's uniform. How did this happen? Like, who is this guy? I want to get to know this guy a little bit better and figure out why he was in prison and how he just got out. Will he get caught? I mean, right? Like, is he going to get away with it? So I really like that as a hook to the episode. And it's actually a relatively short sequence, right? Where all of this stuff happens, where he escapes prison. But it just kind of puts you into a situation very quickly. And it's just really an interesting, right, to watch. Kind of cool, right? An awe-inspiring thing of this guy escaping prison. But then it's also this mystery of like, okay, why is this happening? I want to figure out more. I want to find out how this happened, and like I said, will he get caught and all that stuff. So something like, Breaking Bad, I think, has one of the best hooks of all time, and I'm sure, I'll put that to the test when watching some more pilot episodes. But to me, this is kind of in a similar vein. Again, it's that kind of throwing you into a situation that you don't really know what's going on yet, but it gets you hooked, right? And that's kind of the key for these pilot episodes. For the new show, it's on. The way that this was too at network TV, of course, it just kind of comes up on the channel and you're watching it. They need to hook you in those first few minutes. And I think the hook is great here. And then if you want to extend a little bit past the whole Neil thing, even the Peter thing is pretty cool too. Where you have them decoding this safe. It's actually kind of this, tense kind of scene that you're put into there as well, kind of just thrust into. And then you find out the kind of twist of the last second is that the guy outsmarted them. Even though they've cracked the code, they get the safe, but it self-destructs, and he spelled FBI with the code to get in, right? And so that too, I think, is a really great, like I said, introduction for Peter. But again, if you want to even extend that into kind of the hook of the episode, that's pretty cool too, right? It's a pretty cool way of doing it. And it actually is almost a device that works just so Diana can come and tell Peter that Neil has escaped, right? Because that's really where the story of this episode starts, is when Peter then goes to the jail to talk to the warden, and they, and he goes after Neil, right? And then the two of them meet. That's kind of like where the episode starts, right? Or where our story starts. But just for a scene as a device, right? To have Diana come to tell Peter and for Peter to hear the news, that is such a cool way of doing that, right? You literally could have just had Peter in his office at the FBI, Diana walks in and says, Neil Caffrey escaped, right? That could have worked too, but this is so much cooler and so much more, kind of entertaining, and again, hooks, right? It hooks you in to the scene and to that, the character of Peter and just kind of that situation. So can't say enough about the hook in the opening here, and also a bit of that ending, kind of that cliffhanger as well for a procedural show. Really impressive. So can't say enough about that. Really awesome stuff in terms of the hook here. So then lastly, just want to talk about the originality or uniqueness, right? Does it stand out within the genre it's in? So this one I would categorize I guess it is a cop drama, right? A procedural cop drama. You want to say like a buddy cop drama, right? I think you can say, I'm not sure if that's like technically a genre name, but that's kind of what it is. It's this buddy cop drama. It's this duo of these two guys. But of course, what makes this original or unique is that one of the two of the buddy cop is not a cop. He's actually a criminal and is then going to work as an informant with Peter, right, to solve these crimes. So it's someone kind of on the inside who's kind of, helping the guy on the outside, which is Peter, catch these other criminals in his world, right, in his kind of realm. So that does make it kind of unique, right, in having this. And I'm not sure if this was done before White Collar. I really am not sure. I can't speak to that. I don't think it was. Like, I think this was kind of a novel concept, but I could be totally wrong there. But I think it's novel enough, at least, right? Like, even if it had been done before, where we get this kind of criminal teaming up with the cop and then they kind of solve crimes together kind of thing, I think it is still relatively novel, right? Like the main kind of trope, if you will, or the kind of basic one is that it's two cops in a buddy cop drama who are solving crimes, right? And you get these, I think the kind of the personalities though are not necessarily unique, right? You get kind of the stick up his ass guy and the kind of smart ass guy, right? That I don't think is necessarily unique to the show. But what is unique is that one of them is a criminal, right? One of them is a criminal and one of them is a cop. And it just happens to be this duo that kind of come together. So that way I do think it's unique. Again, maybe it was done before, but I do think it's still unique enough that it kind of transcends just that, typical buddy cop drama. But otherwise, of course, we get kind of a case of the week thing in this pilot episode for sure. And then we kind of get a bit of the subplot, right, with, Peter and his wife. And, obviously they plant kind of the seeds for Neil and Kate and that kind of mystery, like I said, that cliffhanger at the end that they leave it with. So in terms of that, kind of a very basic kind of format here for a procedural kind of cop drama. Like I said, case of the week, little subplot about a family. Usually they bring the families into things, a lot in these shows. And so we do see, kind of some of those tropes in this episode. So I would say, original, unique in some ways, and in other ways, it is still, kind of that procedural cop drama. You're going to get some of those tropes in there. But again, I will say, even just that cliffhanger of having that kind of mystery looming and that kind of subplot that's going to continue on throughout the season, that also makes it a little unique in terms of a procedural show. So I'll give it some consideration there as well. Again, like I said, for something like Suits, it just ends. And that's kind of, the episode's wrapped up, the case of the week is solved, and we move on. And in this, it is, again, the case gets solved. It's kind of, the resolution comes at the end of the episode, but we do get that kind of little glimpse of what might come later. And that's what I think separates it a little bit. So anyways, then just in terms of kind of the general stuff, I do think the dialogue is really great here. I mean, just really great. The back and forth. There actually is quite a bit of laughs to be had in this pilot episode, and that's what I loved about White Collar. Such witty dialogue, and Suits, you could say the same thing, right? It's kind of the same kind of vein here, right? But I think this was maybe even funnier than Suits. It is kind of this a little bit of a comedy at times, I would say, in this episode. I think that's fair to say, for these kind of beats back and forth, especially the character of Mozzie, too. A couple of the scenes that he's in, he just brings, and again, I'm not sure if that's Willie Garson kind of putting that into the role, or that's how the character was written specifically. But yeah, just some really kind of comedic moments for him in this episode, too. So, I really did enjoy this pilot episode. For a show that's one of my favorites of all time, and of course from me having seen the entire show in its run, it was really cool to look back on this, and like I said, hadn't seen it in years, so it was like watching it again. But I did remember some things for sure in the episode. So all right, with all that being said, then I'm gonna give this a rating out of 10. So this one I am going to give a 7.5 out of 10. This is the same rating as the Suits pilot that I gave, but I will say I do like this one better. So maybe like a 7.75 or something like that, right? I do want to compare each of the pilots to each other when I do these ratings, so I just wanted to say that it's the same as Suits, but I do like it a little bit better. So out of the 3 so far, I guess this would be second place, right? Whatever. As we do more, I'm sure we'll get into a bit of a better ranking there. But yeah, 7.5 out of 10 for this one. Just really enjoyed watching this pilot episode, and just really kind of getting to spend some more time with these characters. And like I said, seeing Willie Garson again too was great. So that'll just about do it then for my review of the White Collar pilot. Again, like I said at the top, love to hear your guys' thoughts on this pilot episode, or if, just the show in general. If you were a fan of it, you watched it back when it was on, or if you rewatch it regularly, all of that stuff. Love to hear anything you guys want to share on that one. But anyways, in the future, looking to do Sons of Anarchy, Fringe. Those are kind of the 2 I'm thinking of next, and I've seen neither of those pilots. So really looking forward to taking a look at those next, and hopefully that'll be in the next couple weeks. So yeah, look forward to those if you're interested. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this one, and we'll see you then in my next review.